Did you know there's a prophecy that mentions Operation Epic Fury by name? It tells us what's going to happen to Iran, aka Persia. It tells us what's going to happen to the United States of America, and it also tells us the fate of the president, Donald Trump, after the war ends. The answer is probably no, which is strange because this is a prominent prophecy in the book of Daniel. It's Daniel chapter 8. The problem is that if you look up Daniel 8, there are hundreds of YouTube videos, even popping up every week. This very week, I've seen many videos that were just put out about Daniel 8. The problem is that they all seem to obfuscate the actual meaning of what's going on. They cover up what is really being talked about in this prophecy, which is the current war. We're actually living in it. This is the first time that I can remember in 40 years of reading the Bible that an actual prophecy is happening right now while we're living in 2026. This is so important for you to look at. Why? Not just because you might say, oh, well, prophecy is not very important to me, but this prophecy, the second half of it leads right up to the coming of the Antichrist. And if you know anything about Bible prophecy, the Antichrist, why is that important? Is because when the Antichrist's rule, if you want to call it, is over, then Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus Christ for some of you, he returns to earth and sets up his kingdom. So this is a very important prophecy that so many people are overlooking. Go do a search for Daniel 8 and you'll see that almost everybody, all of the ministers and the prophecy so-called experts out there, they all say that it was fulfilled with Alexander the Great 2,300 years ago. There's a big problem with that, and we're going to look at it. 3 times in Daniel 8, it says that it's a prophecy for the end times and for the latter days and for many, many days in the future. It's not talking only about Alexander the Great, given it might be talking partially about Alexander the Great, because many prophecies have a dual or sometimes even a 3-way fulfillment. They can apply to more than one time in prophecy. We're not going to get into that in history, in actual events. But what we are going to look at is the actual wording to see where it mentions epic fury in this scripture. By word, it actually names it. And it's going to tell us the fate of President Donald Trump, which might surprise many of you. And it's also going to tell us what's going to happen to Iran and the United States. Let's take a look at that right now. So we're in Daniel 8. And if you look at, and I definitely recommend that you read this prophecy, it's not even that long. It'll take you maybe 10 minutes. I'm a slow reader, and I could still read through it in about 10 minutes, the whole chapter. But it says in verse 3, so Daniel has this vision. Now, I've made many other videos about this, but I'm going to talk about it again here. Daniel was captive. He was one of the Israelites that was captive in Babylon at the time, and he has this vision. In the vision, he sees himself in Persia or Iran. At the time, obviously, it wasn't called Iran. He sees himself in the city of Susa or Shushan in Iran. And he says, then I lifted my eyes and I saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram which had 2 horns. A ram, you know what a ram is, and it has these 2 horns. And then it says that the ram, what's interesting, it says the ram was pushing westward, northward, and southward. And I know that Iran has been pushing maybe westward and southward, but until just days ago, just a day or two ago, as of March 6th of 2026, it hadn't been really pushing northward that I knew of. But probably somebody could put in the comments if they've known about the problems it's had with the countries to the north. But it just showed that Iran shot missiles at Azerbaijan, which is to the north of Iran. So it fulfilled that part of it too. So it's pushing westward, northward, and southward. And then it says in verse 5 that the male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the earth, without touching the ground. and it had a notable horn between his eyes. And Gabriel, the angel, is going to tell us that the horn represents the leader of that country. So these are countries. These two animals are two countries, two nations, right? And so the male goat, this is really interesting language. It says the male goat comes from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. Now, of course, the people who tried to say that this is Alexander the Great, they have to add words to the scripture. But I say, why not just take it for literally the way it's describing it? Now, of course, it's not literal because it's talking about symbolic, a male goat and a ram. We understand that. But it says that it comes across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. I've never heard in other prophecies language like that. So, of course, they say that's Alexander the Great, who came from the Greece area through Turkey and over to Persia, which is modern day Iran. And they said, well, the reason it says it came over this whole surface of the earth without touching the ground is because he went swiftly or he went quickly. Okay, fine. But the United States actually did come to Persia, Iran, without touching the ground. Back in July, it came through the air. It literally fulfilled this scripture to the T. It came only by air. It filled up by air, and those planes that bombed all of the nuclear sites never touched down during the whole mission. So, I mean, it fulfilled it amazingly. Somebody, even Daniel, when he had this whole vision, at the end of it, he says, I felt sick at the end. I had no idea what I had just seen. I didn't understand it, he says. And so we can see, yeah, how could he understand a flying goat with one horn in the middle of his head going around the whole surface of the earth and trampling on this ram? Okay, so then it says, now here's in verse 6 is where it actually mentions the name of the mission. What's the name of the mission? Epic Fury. So give a little leeway here. Does it actually say epic fury? No, it says this. It says, then he came to the ram that had two horns. The he is the goat, which I think is the United States. And we'll see again why later, which I had seen standing beside the river. And he ran at him with furious power. Right there, furious power, with fury and power. Epic fury. How much closer can it get? They actually name, and nobody else is talking about this prophecy. So I don't think any of the people who name the missions for their military missions know about this. Hopefully they'll find out about it now. Well, although it's not that important. But for you to see, I want to show you all the so-called coincidences. So here you have this male goat traveling around the whole surface of the earth without touching the earth. And then you have the name of the mission is Furious Power, which epic fury. And then what else happens? And then I saw him, the goat, confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him. He attacked the ram and broke his two horns. So later, we know that Gabriel, the angel, comes and explains to Daniel this whole prophecy. He tells him what's happening, and he tells him that the two horns are the two leaders. So we know that Ayatollah Khomeini, or however you say his name, was killed. So I want you to remember that, because it says he broke his two horns. The horns on the animals are the leaders. The animals are the actual nation. So I don't know what the other horn represents, because it says that the ram is Media-Persia, or the Persians and the Medes. We know that Iran is composed of 60% Persians. Now the Medes, is that the other 40, some of the other 40%? I don't know who they are. Could that be the Kurds? I don't know. Do you have a theory of who the Medes are? Or is it just northern Iraq? Is it Iraq? Could it be something there? Not exactly sure about that, but we definitely know that one of those horns, it says that the two horns were broken. So we know that one of them is the Ayatollah, because he was absolutely the leader of that country. And so up to that point, this is how we know we are right in the middle of this prophecy. But we're in the middle of it, because as of March of 2026, the rest of it hasn't happened. Now watch this. It says that the goat, which I think is the United States, cast him down to the ground and trampled him. It's interesting that it uses the verb trample and not destroy, because we know that the United States and Israel that are attacking Iran, they're trying to hit all of the places where the military is and all of the political places. They're trying to do that. They don't want to actually hurt. I guess this is a controversial issue, but they say they don't want to hurt any of the Iranians, any of the civilians. Um, and so they're just trying to hurt all the other places. So they destroyed the nuclear sites, and they're trying to hurt all of the places of power, the military people, the people with guns and missiles and drones and all of that kind of stuff. So it says that it will trample it. So this is all speaking in the past tense, obviously. So, or future tense, but that it will have happened in the future. So then watch what happens. So here now in verse 8, it tells us what's going to happen to, I believe this is the prophecy that's talking about what will happen to the president, Donald Trump. Right here it says, therefore, the male goat grew very great. So the male goat is the United States. But when he became strong, so this is after the war is over, after he trampled on Iran. But when he became strong, the large horn was broken. So we saw that when it talked about the two horns on the ram, the leaders of Media-Persia or Iran, that those were broken. And we know that the Ayatollah, we know what happened to the Ayatollah there. He's dead. Well, now it says that the horn, that single horn on the goat, it says that after this, therefore, the male goat grew very great in verse 8, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken. What, I don't know, you can tell me what you think that means, broken. If it's the same as the Ayatollah, well, we know he died. In the best case scenario, he could be impeached. Maybe the president will be impeached and taken out that way. He won't be in control of this goat anymore. This goat won't have that leader anymore. It will be broken. Impeached, I say the best case, meaning he'll still be alive, which is good, because I don't want to see anybody dead, and I'm not happy about any of this. This is a very, really a terrible vision of what's going to happen. It doesn't matter what I believe, what anyone believes. It's going to happen. These are the words of Yeshua the Messiah and the Father. They inspired these words. They gave the message to Daniel. They're not Daniel's words, obviously. He wrote it down. He saw it. You could say it's his words, but it didn't come from him. The vision was given to him. If you don't believe in Bible prophecy at all, then yeah, then this isn't for you. But Daniel received this vision. He wrote it down. He himself said, I wrote it down. I don't know what I saw, right? He says at the end, at the very end. Well, I want to show you the 3 verses that do say that this was for an end time event, so that you know that this is not referring to Alexander the Great. It says in verse 17, understand, son of man, that the vision, this is Gabriel, the angel, the archangel, talking to Daniel. He says, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end, one time. Verse 19, he says, and he said, look, I am making known to you what should happen in the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be. 2 times it mentions the end. And then finally, at the very end of the chapter, in verse 26, it says, therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. I'm reading from the New King James translation, and you can check it in your translation or different translations. But let's go on. So then after we see the beginning part, now in verse 16, Gabriel is talking to Daniel, and he starts to explain again in verse 20 that the ram that you saw, they are the kings of the Medes and Persians, the kings of Media and Persia. Look on an old Bible map. Just do a Google search, old Bible map of the Middle East or of Media and Persia, or Medes, M-E-D-E-S, and Persians. And you'll see that it's that area. Different maps are all slightly different, but all the basic area is where Iran is right now. And then it says that the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. So that's why people believe it's Alexander the Great. It's Greece. It can't be the United States. The United States is not mentioned in Bible prophecy. Why not? Why not? Greece is a perfect symbol for the United States. Look at Washington, D.C., all Greco-Roman architecture. We have a democracy, democracy. It's a Greek word. It means government by the people. That's there's so many similarities between ancient Greece. I'm not talking about modern Greece. Ancient Greece from 2,500 years ago till and the United States now as an empire, as a modern world power, and their army was great. They had so many similarities, even with the culture, with democracy, with their acting, and with their language. The New Testament was written in Greek when all the writers were Jewish, and their language was Hebrew or Aramaic. But they decided to write it in Greek because they knew the message would get out. If you want to write a book nowadays and make sure it gets out to everybody, you write it in English, because English is the language that's mostly used in business and commerce and in many ways in the world. There's so many similarities between ancient Greece and the United States. And let's see what else. So the now you'll notice in verse 22, it says, "As for the broken horns," meaning the horn on the goat, which I believe is the president of the United States, then four stood up in its place. Four kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. So I do believe why this is so amazing. I believe something terrible is going to happen besides what's already terribly happening. The wars and the rumors of wars are starting all over the place, which Yeshua warned about in or told about in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. I recommend reading those chapters. But if they were just to do something to the president of the United States, well, then he has his vice president, and even after him, then there's the Secretary of State, and there's a whole kind of line of succession. So I believe that we can already see on some websites some videos of Putin, and I haven't seen them of Xi Jinping, but China and Russia are watching this whole situation in the Middle East. They're not happy about it at all. Let's face it. And they're not, you can think maybe they're weak or something, but they are not happy about this. And I don't think they are not going to do anything. Sorry for the double negatives there, but they're planning. They got to be planning something, and it's not good. And the reason I'm talking about it is for us who read the Bible, we know that this time in history was going to come someday in our lifetimes. We thought it might. Some people don't believe it will. They think it's hundreds or thousands of years of the future. If you think this is all allegory and just a story, then definitely this video isn't for you. But if you believe in Bible prophecy and you want Yeshua to come, that's the only reason that this is kind of interesting, is because after this, Yeshua will return back to earth and set up his kingdom. And then things will start to get good when there's no war and there's peace, and he'll wipe away all tears and all the good things that we know it says in our Father's and Yeshua's kingdom that's coming. But it's still very interesting to watch it because it says that the United States will be divided into four parts. I know that's hard to believe. Everyone's, that's crazy. No, it already happened with Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great did not live during the time of the end. This says it's in the time of the end. So it could be a prior fulfillment, a partial fulfillment, but it's not a complete fulfillment. This is the time of the end. And I'm going to go over this in another video, not now, it's too much to go over, but from verses in Daniel 8, verses 23 through about 26, it talks about the Antichrist. And that's why it's so important. So if you want to take a look at this, but I'm going to talk about this in my next video. I plan to do that. These verses, Daniel 8, 23 through 26, 2 Thessalonians 2 through 9, 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 2 through 9, and Revelation 13, 2 through 9, roughly. those 3 chapters, separated by about 700 years of history, you can see they all have the same author. That Yeshua, our Messiah, he inspired Daniel. Yeshua himself said it. John, he gave the words to John, and then Paul wrote them in 2 Thessalonians 2. You could see, though, it's all the same message. And for these people who say, oh, the Bible is just, you can interpret it a million different ways. Now, here you see the consistency. It's the same message separated by 700 years. And you could see that when they were writing them down, they almost didn't even know what they were writing. Definitely John and Daniel were kind of just, they're writing down what they were seeing in the visions, but the visions match up. Now, definitely, well, Yeshua knew what he was telling John, but Paul received his information in his vision too. In 2 Thessalonians 2, he wrote that down and warned us about that coming time. But I'm going to talk about that in the next video, where it talks about how, and you'll see the language, it talks about the same things, about this little horn, the Antichrist, the son of perdition, where he receives his power from somewhere else, and how he talks about our Father and Yeshua in heaven, and he wants to be worshipped as a God. But anyway, please be watching. Keep an eye on what's happening out there with Iran and the United States and Israel, because this, I think, before the end of this year, that a lot of these things are going to be fulfilled that I just talked about. Just like what happened to the leaders of Iran, the leader of Iran, and what's going on there. Something huge is going to happen in the world. But we know, if you read Bible prophecy, that it's has to get bad before it gets good. Like, it's called the tribulation. It's going to be a time period. Some people believe it's 7 years, some 3.5 years, where it's really bad. And so we were always wondering, when is it happening? Is the tribulation start yet? But we're right now in the middle of this prophecy in Daniel 8, and no one else is talking about it. No other videos are out there. There's nobody. Everyone, I see videos put up just days ago talking about Daniel 8, but they all just calmly say, oh, it's Alexander the Great. It's Alexander the Great. Maybe it was, but it's also this, because it's fulfilled to the word. Actually, the name of the operation, Epic Fury, it's named right there. I look forward to reading your comments, and I hope this was a blessing for you.